I don't think it's uncommon to have nightmares about flying and getting tangled up in wires.
A wire strike accident is not the kind of accident that tends to happen to the young and inexperienced pilots.
Pilots need to understand not all wires are marked, and at typical flight speeds, they will be almost invisible.
There's a good chance that you'll come across some situation that will catch you off guard, and you will let your guard down momentarily, and that's what it'll get you.
Totally invisible, never saw any poles or anything whatsoever. Just all of a sudden I'm looking at the shoreline of the river and then the water, and then just multiple strands of wires just that quick.
A growing web of steel towers and electric wires is spreading across the nation. Thousands of new telecommunications antennas are going up every year. And every day, these hard-to-see obstacles pose a deadly threat to every pilot, crew, and passenger who flies below 1,000 feet.
The jobs that helicopters do, whether it's firefighting, airborne law enforcement, EMS, aerial applications, electronic news gathering, they all spend their time at predominantly 1,000 feet or less, so they're operating nearly constantly in a wire-rich environment.
Multiple demands are placed upon a pilot's attention when operating in the low-altitude wires environment.
When we're flying at mosquito control, all of our flying that we do is low level, 100 feet or below. We have to be able to divide our attention between these obstacles and wires.
It's important to understand that familiarity with the hazards in a known airspace is no guarantee of safety.
40% of the pilots who hit wires, which is nearly half, knew the wire was there when they hit it. You can go out here and take a look at a power pole and look up and clearly see the wire and say, well, there it is. It's a visible hazard. But when you put a pilot and a crew in an aircraft 60 feet above the ground looking in a different direction or looking down on that wire, all of a sudden it becomes a very, very different entity. Visibility science becomes a huge issue there. And pilots and crews are subject to illusions. They're subject to different light perspectives on the line. The key here is that the wire isn't visible all the time. It's not consistently visible to a crew in the air.
As we look at these lines, the same set of lines, you can see areas where some of them are very obvious and easy to see, and others are invisible. And that's always the case. And so that's why it is so important to first take a look at altitude, a recon, before going down there.
High recon is always recommended because the wires environment is dynamic and constantly changing.
There's going to be more big towers and big lines in the air than we've seen in the last 50 years, more than we've ever had here in America. And there's going to be more hazard for people who are flying in those areas than we've ever seen before. So if ever there was a time to think about what's out there in the electric grid, if you're going to be in the air, this is it.
It's a myth that more time in the cockpit will make you more safe. Experience is not a guarantee for safe flying in the wires environment.
So a low number of flight hours or inexperienced pilots are not typically the pilots that are getting involved in these accidents. Usually these are pilots that have over 2,000 hours, are usually between 45 and 55 years old, so have been flying for several years, and just for whatever reason lose their situational awareness.
Training in the hazards associated with this particular environment is the essential ingredient.
I would hope that the pilots would not have to talk the management into providing the wire strike training. I like to believe that us, and in terms of HAI and other associations and agencies, have already done our job and have made companies and owner-operators aware of the benefit of wire strike training, and that they're already doing it. If that's not the case, unfortunately, and your company and your management are not providing this type training and don't seem to be focusing on it, then I would suggest strongly that you open up a dialogue with your management, and you also might take the initiative and volunteer to your management to set up that training program and actually run and operate it.
Well, a good training program should consist of a number of things. First of all, crew resource management is essential in the wire and obstruction environment. Almost all aircraft, with few exceptions, operate down low level in this environment with a crew. And so a training program should involve everybody who is crew member on board that aircraft, whether that be a lineman, whether that be a flight nurse, police officer, whoever. Everybody has to be speaking the same language. When you're looking at things like guy wires, and when you're looking at things like static wires or skylines or conductors, we don't learn about that traditionally as pilots unless we've been fortunate enough to be mentored by somebody who really understands those hazards. So having a firm understanding of what the enemy looks like in this environment, I think, is so terribly important, because what you are ultimately going to see down there is going to be a product of what you expect to see. Expectation plays a major role in identifying a wire and obstruction strike accident before you get there.
New technologies may one day be deployed widely enough to help pilots avoid obstructions.
But there again, it's important to remember that technology is nothing more than a fail-safe. It's certainly no substitute for training.
If I could emphasize one piece of advice, it would be this. Pilots notoriously have the misconception that they will see wires in time when flying at wire level, and you just can't count on it.
If there was one thing that I could communicate, it would be the fact that wire and obstruction strike accidents are preventable. They're completely preventable if the pilots and crews take the time to understand what the enemy really looks like, understand what the hazards are down there.